6 months after Tobias Crane stole his cousin's printing house, a railway solicitor halted his largest land sale because of one page from a supposedly blank guest book. By then, Margaret Hale knew why Tobias wanted the ruined Swan and Sheaf Inn. When he sent men to remove her press, she knew only that her father's will gave him Hale Printing and left her the inn's debts. He promised an auction within a fortnight. Margaret went there to rescue any paper she could sell. The guest register contained 70 blank leaves. She nearly fed one to the kitchen fire, but heat from the grate brought a line of brown script through the fibers. She warmed the page with her printer's composing stick wrapped in cloth. A name appeared. Then a date, a payment, and a symbol shaped like an open hand. Margaret recognized the name as a woman whose illustrations had made Hale Printing profitable, though the account books credited Tobias's father. On the next leaf, the same symbol appeared beside 5 more names. Margaret heard wagon wheels stop outside. Tobias had arrived 3 days earlier than promised, carrying a deed box and a crowbar. She hid one warmed leaf inside her bodice and left the remaining book open on the table. The kitchen door struck the wall. Tobias entered first, followed by 2 men from Hale Printing. He was 39, clean-collared, and annoyed whenever dirt behaved as if it had rights. His eyes moved from the open register to the grate. "You found kindling," he said. "I found an inn. You found 80. £3 and 9 shillings in debt with a building attached." He lifted the top register leaf. The writing had already faded in the cold air. Margaret had chosen the decoy well. Tobias turned it toward the window, saw nothing, and let it fall. "Where is the iron cupboard?" he asked. That question told her he had come for more than an inventory. The Swan and Sheaf had been closed for 7 years. Margaret had never crossed its threshold before that morning. Tobias, however, went directly to a low panel beside the bread oven. He wedged the crowbar into its seam. "The fixtures belong to me until the estate is settled," Margaret said. "The contents secure the brewery charge." He leaned on the bar. "I purchased that charge yesterday." The panel splintered. Behind it stood a shallow iron cupboard with its lock already removed. Tobias searched the empty shelves and ran his fingers along the back. One of his men found the register bundle. "Shall this go in the box?" Tobias looked at Margaret. "Old lodging accounts may explain the debt. Then leave them with the debtor. I would rather leave you nothing to misunderstand." He placed the 69 remaining leaves inside his deed box. Margaret kept her shoulders still. The hidden page scratched against her stays whenever she breathed. Before closing the cupboard, Tobias pried a paper label from its bottom shelf. Only a torn corner remained, printed in faded green ink. Margaret saw 3 words before he folded it into his pocket. 6 hands. Second. "The auction is 11 days from now," he said. "Sign the surrender tonight, and I will give you £2 for the journey back to Shrewsbury." "Back to what?" His expression almost softened. "You are an able engraver. Someone will employ you." Margaret had spent 18 years cutting blocks, planning sheets, and correcting impressions at Hale Printing. The small proofing press Tobias removed that week had been bought with her wages. Her receipt lay in his office because her father insisted all business papers remain together. William Hale had taught her to estimate paper to the last quire. Martha Sedgwick's unsigned illustrations had taught her everything else. They showed where to leave white space, how a bent wrist conveyed strain, and why one clear image could reach a struggling reader. "Your men took my press," Margaret said. "Father's will gave me the premises and machinery. Jeremiah Crane was your father. William Hale was mine." Tobias pinched dust from one glove. "And William left me the business." He went out through the coach arch with his deed box. The wheels of his wagon broke weeds that had grown higher than the hubs. Margaret waited until the sound faded. Then she drew the hidden leaf from her bodice. At 35, she had copper-brown hair that refused a smooth part, and hazel eyes made sharper by years of judging faint lines. She wore an umber wool dress, a bottle-green bonnet, and the blue-black apron Tobias's men had called company property before leaving it on the floor. She wrapped the composing stick again and heated it slowly. 6 names surfaced on the loose page: Martha Sedgwick, Phoebe Armitage, Louisa Trent, Ellen Pugh, Caroline Dacre, and Bridget Knoll. Each stood beside a date in 1855, a payment in pence, and a different open-hand device. Under the last name appeared a short line: "Second impression kept at the sheaf." Tobias had taken the register. He had missed the only leaf that told Margaret where to begin. The Swan and Sheaf stood outside Wychford, a Shropshire market village 8 miles from Shrewsbury. In April 1870, the old turnpike still carried farm carts, carriers, and a few coaches displaced by faster trains. The inn faced the road with a black and white timber front above a red sandstone base. Its broad coach arch sagged at the center. A narrow skittle alley ran behind the stable wall beneath its own slate roof. Margaret spent the afternoon listing what could kill her first. The bread oven smoked into the kitchen. 3 floorboards above the beer cellar had rotted through. The yard pump gave brown water, and 11 windows had broken panes. A crack beside the coach arch was wide enough to hold her composing stick. She had £4, 7 shillings, 2 blankets, and a box of engraving tools that Tobias had dismissed as personal effects. Old bills explained how the ruin had accumulated. The last innkeeper closed half the bedrooms after the railway diverted coach traffic. Brewery interest continued after the beer stopped selling. Window tax had ended years earlier, yet no one replaced glass lost during 2 winters. The yard remained useful because carriers still turned there on market days. That practical strip of packed earth had kept rates and maintenance charges alive, while the building earned almost nothing. Margaret marked the kitchen, 1 taproom corner, and the ground floor chamber as possible working spaces. Everything else received a chalk cross. She carried no illusion that labor could replace money. A braced beam remained weak. Oiled paper kept wind out and thieves from seeing inside, but it did not become a window. Her first task was to prevent fresh damage while earning enough to choose the next repair. Near dusk, a wheelwright arrived carrying a lantern and a short oak prop. He introduced himself as Owen Pell and looked past Margaret as if the building might answer for her. "Your father owed me £1.06, he said. "Put it with the other 80. 3. That's an answer. It isn't payment. I can offer 6 pence to prop the gallery floor." Owen walked beneath the sagging rail, struck 1 post with his knuckles, and stepped away before a shower of grit fell. "1 shilling, he said. "You hold the lamp and keep quiet when I tell you to move. 8 pence, and I won't promise the second condition." He studied her ink-stained thumb. 10 pence. They settled on 10. Owen braced the weakest joist and showed her which section of the gallery to avoid. He was broad, graying at the temples, and careful with timber that other men would have replaced. His caution made Margaret trust him more than friendliness would have. "Crane has been asking about the yard for months," he said. "A railway surveyor measured from the road to the skittle wall in January." "Why? No one measures worthless land 3 times. After he left, Margaret slept on the kitchen settle with the heated leaf inside her toolbox. Wind moved through the broken windows. The inn answered with small practical noises. A loose shutter, a mouse beneath the hearth, and water tapping into a pan from the scullery ceiling. At first light, she studied the page without heat. The open-hand devices were nearly invisible, yet their impressions remained in the paper. They were not drawn. Each had been pressed from a woodblock. Under a magnifying glass, Margaret saw a nick at one wrist and a white crescent where the engraver had cut too deep. She knew that hand. It appeared in a copy of The Working Companion, printed by Hale and Crane in 1855. The book had been reissued every year under Jeremiah Crane's name. Its best-known illustration showed a laundress lifting a copper lid safely. Margaret had copied the scene as a girl, wondering why the credited artist drew women's hands with such exact knowledge. Martha Sedgwick's name on the heated leaf supplied the answer. Margaret turned the sheet over. In slanting light, she found a rectangular hollow pressed into the fibers. The page had once served as packing beneath a printing surface. A faint, reversed line crossed the lower margin. She rubbed the side of a soft pencil over thin paper laid above it, never marking the original. Common rooms for work and reading. The words were incomplete, yet they did not describe lodging. Someone knocked on the yard door. A woman in a plain navy cloak entered with 3 school copybooks tied by string. Her name was Sarah Fenn, and she taught 27 children in a room behind the Wesleyan chapel. "Mr. Pell says you mend printing," Sarah said. "Mr. Pell has known me one evening. He usually needs less time to dislike someone." The copybooks required new covers. Sarah could pay 4p and provide paste. Margaret accepted because 4p bought bread and lamp oil. As she worked, Sarah noticed the rubbing beside the guest leaf. "I have seen that open hand." She returned an hour later with a folded wall sheet from the school cupboard. 6 square pictures showed how to clean a cut, brace a ladder, lift a weight, and signal danger around moving machinery. The bottom corner carried the same hand with the nick at its wrist. "We use the pictures with adults on winter evenings," Sarah said. "The imprint says Hale and Crane. Who gave it to the school?" "A former maid from this inn. She said women printed here after midnight." The sheet had been folded through one illustration. Margaret dampened the crease, pressed it between boards, and aligned the torn fibers. Her movements made Sarah stop asking questions. Skill was more persuasive than a family name. At the foot of the sheet, 6 tiny letters had been worked into the border. M, P, L, E, C, and B. They matched the first initials on the heated page. Margaret laid the wall sheet beside her, rubbing. The reversed words aligned with its upper border. The guest leaf had been used as packing, while this very design was printed. "Jeremiah Crane claimed he drew these," Margaret said. Sarah touched the small figure bracing a ladder. "Did he ever lift one?" "Only when someone else carried the other end." The first useful room took 2 days. Margaret cleared the kitchen, patched the broken panes with oiled paper, and paid Owen 5 shillings from her shrinking purse to replace the cellar boards. He refused to cross out her father's older debt. "A man's death doesn't make an account vanish," he said. "No. It merely gives the account to a woman who never ordered the work. You can dispute it." "Did you do the work?" "I did." "Then I won't." That answer traveled through Witchford faster than any notice Margaret could have printed. The butcher brought an account book cover. A carrier brought a split leather pouch. Sarah brought 12 more copybooks and paid the full price without bargaining. Margaret repaired what she could. But binding was slower in her hands than engraving. She needed work that used her real skill. The old inn sign provided it. One face of the Swan and Sheaf had lost all paint. Owen lowered it to the yard so he could replace a rotten hanging pin. Margaret saw shallow cuts beneath the gray surface. The signboard consisted of thinner oak panels fixed across a stout frame. One panel had been mounted with its carved face inward. She removed 4 square nails. On the hidden side appeared a reversed picture of 2 women reading beside a press. "That's no signboard," Owen said. "It is now. Before that, it was a printing block." Margaret cleaned it with dry bread and a soft brush. Ink remained deep in the white line cuts. The outer edge measured type high when laid beside her composing stick. She had no press. Instead, she rolled a thin layer of lampblack ink over the relief, laid damp paper above it, and burnished the back with a wooden spoon. When she lifted the sheet, 2 women appeared around a small hand press. Beneath them stood the open hand mark and 1 line of type. "Paid instruction, Tuesdays and Thursdays." Owen stared at the proof. "Who nailed that inside a tavern sign?" "Someone who expected men to search drawers before looking at the wood around them." The block was too large for ordinary job work, but it proved Margaret could pull a clear image without machinery. She cut a smaller block for Owen's spring cart sale. 1 wheel, a harness trace, and 12 plain words. Sarah's older pupils helped ink 25 sheets. The notices earned Margaret 9 shillings after paper and ink. Owen examined the finished stack. You made the crack in the wheel disappear. I made the wheel look sound. You must do the same before selling it. He laughed once. That might be the first honest advertisement in Shropshire. On the third morning, the Witchford Chronicle printed Tobias's auction notice. It listed the Swan and Sheaf, its yard, its skittle alley, and all timber, fittings, cupboards, panels, and printed waste found on the premises. He had added panels after seeing the register. Margaret took the notice to Abel Greaves, the brewery agent whose name appeared beneath the sale terms. His office smelled of hops and sealing wax. He wore a checked waistcoat and spoke as though every pause accrued interest. Mr. Crane now holds the brewery charge, Abel said. He has instructed us to proceed. What sum would postpone the sale? £11 by Monday. That covers costs and 1/4's interest. It buys 28 days. Margaret had £3, 12 shillings, and 8 pence after repairs, food, and earnings. Who valued the inn-yard? The property is burdened beyond its present worth. That was not my question. Abel aligned his pen with the edge of the desk. The railway has discussed an approach road. Discussion is not a purchase. Has Tobias shown you a plan? Bring £11, Miss Hale. Questions do not postpone auctions. Back at the inn, Sarah had arranged 6 borrowed wall sheets across the kitchen floor. Families had kept them because the pictures helped with burns, machinery, childbirth, clean water, and simple contracts. Each sheet came from 1,855, or 1,856. The open-hand devices differed slightly. Margaret warmed her page over a covered brick. The first hand showed all 5 fingers. The second folded the thumb. The third folded 2 fingers. The pattern continued down the names. They count backward, Sarah said. They mark impressions. Margaret placed the oldest wall sheet first. Printers use a device to identify a shop or edition. These women altered 1 finger for each block set. The dates beside the names matched the publication days. The pence amounts matched sums printed in the subscription boxes at the bottom of the sheets. These were contributions toward the work, not lodging payments. The 5th wall sheet carried a short list of places where adults could attend evening lessons. The Swan and Sheaf appeared beside a small drawing of 6 hands around an open book. Under magnification, Margaret found a dot placed beside the 3rd finger. The dot sat in the same position as a wormhole on the block hidden in the inn sign. That block had printed the sheet. Owen joined them in the skittle alley. Its lane was 24 yards long, built of elm planks raised on narrow cabinets. Most people saw benches and storage boxes. Margaret saw brass finger pulls placed at regular printer's case intervals. Those are type cases, she said. Owen knelt beside the nearest support. They've been nailed from above. Can you lift 1 lane board without splitting it? Yes. How much? You have developed an unfortunate habit of asking before I decide. He charged 3 shillings and made her sign the debt beside her father's account. They removed a skirting strip, cut 2 rusted nails, and raised the end plank with wedges. Beneath it stood shallow oak cases on brick piers. Their drawers had been turned toward the wall. The first drawer held skittle chalk, 2 dead mice, and a roll of brittle paper. The second contained 12 engraved woodblocks wrapped in oilcloth. Each block carried a number on its edge and a smear of colored ink on the back. Margaret lifted one under the lantern. The cut face showed 3 workers reading a pay ticket. Beside each total, the picture included hours, rate, deductions, and the worker's mark. Even someone who read slowly could see when a column disappeared. The edge bore a penciled M.S. Martha Sedgwick, Sarah said. Perhaps. Margaret would not turn hope into proof. A pencil mark can be added. 3 more drawers opened before darkness forced them to stop. They found illustrated safety blocks, alphabet strips for adults, and small pictures designed to be rearranged around different text. The women had created a cheap modular system. One block could serve a mine, mill, laundry, or workshop by changing only the type beside it. Margaret read the drawers by wear. Blocks used most often had polished backs and ink packed into the finest cuts. The alphabet strips showed repeated repair along the vowels. Two wage-form blocks carried shallow plugs where obsolete numbers had been removed and recut. This was a working archive shaped by use, correction, and economy. Its makers expected later hands to alter the words without discarding the pictures. Several blocks bore different colored inks in successive layers. Green had covered black. Red sat only in the warning symbols. Margaret recognized a two-pull registration method that used square paper corners instead of costly pins. Hale Printing had adopted the same method 4 years later and advertised it as Jeremiah Crane's invention. The cases under the skittle lane preserved an earlier sequence of stains that could be compared with dated sheets in Wychford homes. Hale Printing still used the same pictures. Tobias sold them as the Crane Practical Series. The discovery did not postpone Monday's auction. It made the contents more desirable to the man buying them. Tobias returned the following afternoon with Abel Greaves and a railway surveyor. He paused when he saw the lifted lane board. "You have damaged a listed fixture," he said. Owen straightened from his wedges. "I removed a board and put it back. Damage costs extra." The surveyor unfolded a plan on the skittle bench. A proposed station approach crossed the inn yard, passed through the alley, and joined the turnpike beneath the coach arch. Margaret read the scale and calculated the width before Tobias could cover the figures. "A 60-foot approach," she said. "The inn must come down. The company is considering several routes." The surveyor replied. "How much did they offer him?" Tobias folded the plan. "You have no standing in a negotiation concerning my adjoining land. The route cannot reach your land without mine." He led her into the tap room, away from the others. His offer had risen from £2 to 20. He would assume every debt and permit her to retrieve her engraving tools from Hale Printing. "You called the place worthless 3 days ago," Margaret said. "I have taken pity on your position. Your pity has increased tenfold." Tobias's patience thinned. "Father gave you a liability because he knew you could make use of scraps. That does not qualify you to manage property." "Which father?" His face changed. Jeremiah Crane had received the credit. William Hale had allowed it. Margaret no longer intended to protect either man with silence. "The blocks belong to Hale Printing," Tobias said. "If you remove them, I will charge you with theft." "Then you admit you know what they are." He walked out before answering. Margaret and Sarah made an inventory that night. Owen signed the location of every drawer before closing the lane. 48 blocks survived. 6 were open-hand devices. 11 illustrated fair wage forms. The rest made sequential pictures for adult readers and safety sheets. One case held proof scraps with corrections in 6 different hands. Another contained a green prospectus headed 6 Hands Illustrated Rooms. Its lower half had been torn away. The remaining text promised paid instruction, shared ownership of blocks, and a reading room at the Swan and Sheaf. It named no trustees and described no property. On Saturday, Sarah found the former inmate who had given her school the wall sheet. Una Price now kept a laundry near the river. She remembered women arriving through the coach arch after the tap room closed. "Mrs. Sedgwick cut pictures," Una said. Mrs. Armitage set the large letters. The others fed sheets, stitched lessons, and kept the money box. "Did you see a deed?" Margaret asked. "I saw men search for one after Jeremiah Crane dismissed them. They emptied drawers and broke a floor tile. Mrs. Crowther laughed after they left. Agatha Crowther had owned the Swan and Sheaf. Una said she placed the blocks beneath the skittle lane after the search. She died in 1861, and William Hale acquired the inn through a private arrangement no one in Wychford understood. Martha Sedgwick was still alive. She rented an attic in Shrewsbury above a maker of umbrellas. Margaret traveled there with one proof and the heated page rubbing. Martha opened the door only wide enough to show a lined face and white hair cut bluntly at the jaw. Her right hand was curled by rheumatism. "I do not buy old blocks," she said. "I brought one of yours." Martha looked at the proof without taking it. "The name on your card is Hale. So is the name on the press that removed yours. That is your family's concern. It became mine when Tobias sent the auctioneer." Martha tried to close the door. Margaret placed the proof on the landing and stepped back. "The page names 6 women," she said. "If you want it left buried, say so. I will still keep Tobias from selling their work." The latch closed. Margaret waited 1 minute, then descended the stairs, without the proof. Her refusal to force an old woman's trust cost a day she could not spare. It also left the evidence with the person most able to identify it. On Sunday morning, a printer named Ellis Bram came to the inn with a rush order from the railway grading contractor. He needed 3,000 pay tickets by Monday evening. Hale Printing was busy with parliamentary notices, and Sarah had told him Margaret could pull clear forms by hand if necessary. £15, he said. 5 now. 10 on delivery. I can lend a treadle press. £15 would buy the auction delay and leave money for the chimney. Margaret examined his sample ticket. It gave a worker's name and final sum. There was no space for days, rate, task, tool charge, lodging, or deductions. A contractor could write any total and call it settled. "I need the full wage table," she said. "You need to copy what I brought." "Who approved this form?" "Mr. Crane recommended it. He said Hale Printing has used the same ticket for years." Margaret looked again. A small open hand stood in the corner. Tobias had taken a women's design for transparent wages and stripped away every useful column. "I will print it with the columns restored." Ellis pushed 5 sovereigns across the table. "You will print what pays you. Take your money. The sale is tomorrow." "I know." He gathered the coins slowly. "You are giving up an inn over empty boxes. Those boxes are where missing wages go." Ellis left the sample behind in contempt. Before noon, a woman named Anne Clegg came with 3 tickets issued to her 2 sons. The boys had laid trackbed for 6 days. Their totals differed by 8 shillings, although they worked the same hours. "The clerk says one hired tools," Anne said. They carried their father's picks. Margaret ruled a complete ticket on a block of pear wood. She cut spaces for the task, number of days, daily rate, tools, lodging, deductions, and balance. Sarah brought paper intended for the school's summer readers. Margaret bought it from her for £1, although Sarah offered to wait. They printed 200 clear tickets and a wage table that workers could carry to the contractor's pay shed. Owen burnished sheets while Margaret inked. Anne and her sons hung them near the station, works before dawn. The work brought no immediate payment. It consumed £1 8 shillings in paper and ink. At 10 on Monday, Abel Greaves arrived with the auction bell. Martha Sedgwick came through the coach arch before he rang it. She carried the proof Margaret had left, and a small green card protected between 2 pieces of board. Agatha Crowther gave one of these to each woman. Martha said, "Mine says the blocks and rooms were held for our common work. Your father told me the settlement failed after the others died." Margaret examined the card. It bore Martha's signature, the 5-finger hand, an 1855 date, and a number matching the edge of one Skittle Alley block. A line at the bottom referred to an executed settlement deposited with Denholm and Pike, solicitors. "Why did you come?" Margaret asked. Martha glanced at the wage tickets drying across the taproom. "Jeremiah removed those columns first. You put them back when it cost you the building." The auction bell rang outside. Philip Denholm, grandson of the named solicitor, had an office in Shrewsbury. Sarah rode there with Martha's card, the green prospectus, and a sworn note from Una Price. Margaret remained at the inn to watch strangers bid on her inheritance. Abel began with bedsteads, kitchen copper, stable rails, and a quantity of obsolete printer's wood. Tobias stood near the back in a dark coat, bidding through Ellis Bram. The first bedroom furniture sold. The kitchen copper reached 30 shillings. Owen bought the old inn sign for 3p, and left it hanging where it was. When Abel offered the skittle alley contents, a hired boy galloped into the yard with a letter from Philip Denholm. His firm's old docket book contained an entry for the 6-hand settlement. He had filed notice of an equitable claim and requested a short suspension while he searched the deed boxes. Abel read the letter twice. He postponed the property and printer's blocks for 14 days, though the bedroom furniture already sold would be removed. Tobias approached Margaret after the crowd left. "A docket proves a solicitor once charged a fee," he said. "It also proves you offered £20 for something you called valueless. In 14 days, you will have less furniture and the same debt." He looked toward the skittle alley. The patience in his face worried Margaret more than anger. The railway had not waited for the auction. At sunrise, survey stakes divided the coachyard into a red and white grid. A foreman showed Margaret an early entry license signed by Tobias as holder of the brewery charge. It allowed test pits, removal of detached obstructions, and storage of materials along the proposed approach. The skittle alley was the only detached obstruction. Philip Denholm arrived by the first train. He was a thin man in his early 40s, with a permanent crease between his brows. He read the license against the mortgage copy and gave Margaret the answer she did not want. "I can challenge this," he said. "I cannot stop work today without the settlement or a stronger property schedule. The blocks will be gone by supper. Then prove what was there before they move it." Margaret opened the skittle cases. With Sarah, Martha, Owen, and Anne Clegg, she worked through the morning, pulling one clean impression from every block. Sarah numbered each proof. Owen marked its drawer and position on a plan. Martha identified the cuts she made and the parts completed by the other women. Anne carried finished sheets to Denholm, who witnessed their date and condition. The railway foreman gave them until noon. He had no affection for Tobias. Yet he had men and wagons waiting on company wages. "I remove what the plan orders," he told Margaret. "A title dispute belongs with solicitors. When a block reaches the wagon, write its number. Mr. Crane says they are scrap. Then he will not object to an exact list." The foreman allowed it. At 12, workers lifted the skittle planks in order. They dismantled the long roof, stacked the elm lane, and carried out the printer's cases. Nothing collapsed. The destruction was measured, invoiced, and perfectly deliberate. Tobias sent a Hale Printing wagon for the engraved blocks. He claimed them as machinery belonging to the business. Denholm served notice against their sale, but the foreman would not judge ownership beside a test pit. Martha watched the wagon leave. "Jeremiah took them in darkness," she said. "His son has learned to do the same work at noon." By evening, the Swan and Sheaf had lost the wall that sheltered its west yard. A chalk line showed where the new road would cut through the coach arch. The inn remained standing, yet its purpose had been drawn away from it. Margaret hung the 48 witness proofs across the taproom. The room looked like a workshop after everyone had gone home. "We have impressions," Sarah said. "Tobias has the blocks in the press. Owen fitted a temporary fence where the alley had stood. Wood can be followed." He was right. Tobias used the blocks before the week ended. Hale Printing issued a prospectus for the new Wychford Station approach. It showed laborers, carts, and a safe road beneath a row of 6 open hands. Margaret recognized 4 blocks from the skittle cases. Tobias had transformed evidence into an advertisement for the sale it threatened. That carelessness gave Denholm a new line of inquiry. If the blocks belonged to Hale Printing, their profits appeared in its accounts. If they belonged to the 6-hand settlement, every recent impression established continued use and value. The 14-day suspension became 6 weeks after Denholm filed a formal claim on Martha's behalf. The brewery could auction bedroom furniture, Yet it could not convey disputed land while the claim remained active. Margaret lived in 2 downstairs rooms. She cooked over a repaired range and printed small jobs by burnishing blocks she cut herself. Spring passed into a dry summer, while the case moved between letters and searches. Margaret kept a calendar beside the debt account. Every court fee, train fare, quire of paper, and roof patch went onto its own line. The trust claim could recover money later, but later bought no bread. She accepted menus, handbills, labels, mourning cards, and farm sale notices. Work that once seemed too small for Hale Printing kept the kitchen range lit. The demolished alley left the west wall exposed to every afternoon gust. Owen set posts in stages because Margaret could pay for only 6 feet of fence each week. Sarah's pupils gathered nails, straightened them on a stone, and sorted the usable ones by length. Their help reduced costs without pretending children could rebuild a structure. Skilled work still went to Owen and the mason, each recorded at the agreed rate. The fair wage tickets brought work. Men from the railway grading gang paid a penny each for clear copies. A quarry asked for an illustrated blasting signal. 2 laundries ordered cards showing safe copper lifting. The sums were small, but they arrived without apology. Abel Greaves remained skeptical. He visited every Friday, recorded the debt, and inspected the inn for waste. "Good intentions are poor security," he said. "Then keep taking my money." She paid 6 shillings each week. He wrote every payment into the account and never rounded a farthing against her. Fairness from Abel looked like an unsoftened face and accurate arithmetic. Denholm searched his family firm's boxes. The 1,855 docket referred to an executed settlement by Agatha Crowther and 6 subscribers. A later entry showed William Hale withdrew the principal document in 1862 to answer a question about repairs. It was never returned. "Your father had the deed," Denholm said. Margaret remembered Tobias arriving with a deed box and going directly to the iron cupboard. "Tobias has it now. He says the box contains only the will, mortgage, and railway papers. He also said the guest book was kindling. They built the missing settlement from records that had never shared one room. The Witchford rate book charged 2 cottages and the inn yard to Crowther's 6 hands rooms, from 1,850, 5 through 1,861. A Shrewsbury Bank daybook recorded 6 small subscriber payments on the dates in Margaret's heated leaf. Monthly deposits followed from illustrated sheet sales and cottage rents. In 1862, the account changed to Hale Printing receipts without any recorded closure. Sarah found 3 more green membership cards inside old adult readers. Their owners had used them as bookmarks. Each card carried a different hand, a block number, and one founding woman's signature. The cut edges and green ink matched Martha's card. Though every card came from a separate household, Una Price identified Agatha Crowther's hand on the prospectus. Owen and the railway foreman certified the skittle inventory. Anne Clegg produced Ellis Bram's stripped pay ticket beside Margaret's complete version. The difference showed that Tobias still profited by removing the very protections the women had designed. Martha supplied the human truth. The 6 women had worked at Hale and Crane during the day. At night, they printed illustrated sheets for adults excluded from ordinary schools. Agatha offered the skittle alley, lodging income, and 2 cottage rents. She signed a settlement so the work would continue after her death. "We each paid pennies because Jeremiah said women given a room would never own it," Martha said. Agatha wanted the account to show that we entered as subscribers. "Why sympathetic ink?" Denholm asked. Phoebe learned it from a maker of mourning cards. A blank lodging register looked harmless during a search. The warmed pages linked our names to dates, shares, and block devices. Jeremiah Crane dismissed all 6 after a factory ordered 2,000 safety sheets. He kept the type and claimed the illustrations. William Hale objected privately, then accepted half the profits. Years later, he obtained the Swan and Sheaf by calling trust repair costs a personal debt owed to him. Margaret had spent years believing her father weak beside Jeremiah. The records showed a harder truth. William preserved some papers and allowed the blocks to remain hidden. He also took income that belonged to women who had no strength left to fight him. He knew, Margaret said. Martha did not offer comfort. He knew enough to do better. By September, Denholm could state the full legacy. The settlement owned the inn yard, the cottages, the 48 blocks, and the proceeds of the illustrated series. It required paid instruction, public reading rooms, transparent wage forms, and recognition of every maker. Surviving members could appoint working printers to continue it. Margaret also understood the message that first sent her searching. The public wall sheet was the inked impression. Its pressure left a second, blind impression on the register leaf used beneath it as packing. Agatha kept that leaf at the sheaf because its hidden writing joined the 6 subscribers to a print anyone in Wychford could recognize. The material value was substantial. Hale Printing had issued 31 editions using the women's blocks. The railway had offered Tobias £620 for the approach land. He meant to keep both the sale and the printing income while leaving Margaret responsible for the mortgage used to weaken the property. The legal weakness remained. Denholm had cards, accounts, a docket, rates, proofs, and witnesses. Tobias held the executed settlement. Without it, a court might still recognize the trust after a long dispute. The railway company would not wait for one if its directors believed Tobias's title was clean. Their conveyance meeting was scheduled for October 17, exactly 6 months after the men removed Margaret's proofing press. Denholm filed Margaret's evidence with the Severn County's railway solicitor, Stephen Rowntree. Rowntree requested the original guest register and Tobias's complete chain of title. Tobias submitted the 69 blank leaves and an abstract that described William Hale as outright owner after 1862. Before sealing the portfolio, Margaret arranged the exhibits by what each could prove. The page connected names, dates, payments, and devices. The cards established separate members. The bank and rate books traced money and property. The witnessed impressions preserved the removed blocks. Martha supplied authorship, while the current prospectus established Tobias's continued use. Any item could be questioned alone. Together, their dates crossed, without depending on one person's memory. Margaret sent her one warmed page in a sealed portfolio. She included no speech and made no demand. Beside it lay Martha's card, the bank date, and the corresponding block proof. Rowntree replied with 7 words. No completion until the page is explained. Tobias called an extraordinary public meeting at the Wychford Assembly Rooms. Railway shareholders, creditors, tradesmen, and reporters could attend. He intended to discredit Margaret once and complete the sale that afternoon. For 6 months, he had relied on every useful thing, appearing blank, ownerless, or too small to matter. Margaret packed her composing stick, a roller, the heated leaf, and 48 proofs. The assembly room stood above the corn exchange. Tobias had arranged the chairs in straight ranks facing a long table. Behind him, a new railway plan showed the station approach cutting through the Swan and Sheaf in red ink. Stephen Rowntree sat between the company chairman and its surveyor. He was a square-built solicitor with iron-gray whiskers and no interest in anyone's family dignity. Philip Denholm placed Margaret's portfolio at the other end of the table. Tobias began with a polished account of investment, progress, and a decaying inn that obstructed useful transport. He described Margaret as a disappointed relative who had found old printing scraps and mistaken them for title. Rowntree stopped him before the applause settled. "Mr. Crane, did you disclose the 1,855 six-hand settlement in your first abstract? It ceased to have effect when William Hale acquired the premises. That is an opinion. I asked whether you disclosed it." Tobias looked toward his barrister. "No." The answer moved through the room more effectively than a speech. Rowntree called Abel Greaves first. Abel confirmed Tobias had purchased the brewery charge shortly before the auction and offered £20 for Margaret's surrender. He also confirmed the railway price of £620. "I believe the debt lawful," Abel said. "I did not know the yard had been settled for another purpose." The railway foreman produced his block inventory. Every number matched Owen's plan and Sarah's witness proofs. 4 of those images appeared in Tobias's station prospectus after the removal. Tobias's barrister objected. "Use of a block does not prove ownership by a dead woman." "Correct," Margaret said from her chair. The barrister had expected outrage. Her agreement left him without it. Martha took the witness place. She identified the 6 founders, their separate tasks, and Agatha Crowther's green cards. The barrister asked why the cards did not contain a complete property description. "Because they were membership evidence," Martha said. "The settlement held the property description, which you cannot produce." Martha looked at Tobias's deed box. "I believe he can." Roundtree had already requested every original document in Tobias's title chain. The deed box sat under the table beside his chair. Tobias claimed its remaining papers concerned private family matters. "The company will not pay for private assurances," Roundtree said. "Produce the 1,860, to acquisition, and any prior instrument it recites, or completion ends now." Tobias unlocked the box. The 1,862 deed named William Hale as managing trustee for repairs and printing income. It did not convey the Swan and Sheaf to him outright. Attached behind it was Agatha Crowther's executed 1,855 settlement, folded beneath a cover labeled Expired Workroom Arrangement. Denholm read the property schedule aloud. It included the inn, the coachyard, 2 cottages, the skittle alley, all engraved blocks subscribed under 6 open-hand devices, and any income earned from their use. The final clause continued the rooms for working printers chosen by the surviving members. Death did not end the settlement. Martha's presence activated the very provision Tobias had treated as obsolete. Tobias stood. William Hale was the last acting trustee. His will gives me Hale Printing. A trustee cannot bequeath trust property as his own. Denholm said. Then why did he collect the income? Margaret answered before anyone could protect her father. Because he did wrong. The room became still. Tobias had expected her to defend William and weaken the records. She refused. Roundtree unfolded the heated guest leaf. We still have the question of this page. Margaret placed it beside one blank leaf from the register Tobias submitted. Both had the same blue ruling, chain spacing, pinholes, and Holland's Mill watermark. She warmed her composing stick over a spirit lamp, wrapped it in cloth, and moved it beneath the page. Brown writing rose slowly through the fibers. The 6 names, dates, pence, and changing hands became visible to the back rows. The bank clerk matched each date and payment to the 1,855 day book. Sarah presented 3 membership cards, found in separate books. Their hand devices corresponded to the names and block numbers on the warm page. Margaret then set the oldest school wall sheet beside her pre-removal proof. She pointed to the wormhole dot on the 3rd finger and the accidental white crescent at the wrist. Both flaws appeared on the heated page's blind impression. The 1,855 school copy, the block proof, and Tobias's new railway prospectus. This sheet spent years as packing under the same printing surface, Margaret said. The block pressed its shape into the paper before the writing faded. I could copy a drawing. I could not give new paper an old pressure, history shared by copies kept across Wychford. The barrister asked whether she knew the bank figures before visiting the inn. No. Mr. Denholm found the daybook 4 months later. Your father may have told you. My father never told me Martha Sedgwick existed. Martha's jaw tightened, but she kept her eyes on Tobias. Anne Clegg presented the stripped railway pay tickets and Margaret's complete form. Workers in the rear held copies showing days, rates, and deductions. This evidence did not decide the land title. It established that the women's design still had a public use, and that Tobias profited by removing its safeguards. Roundtree conferred with the company chairman. The sale required an unchallenged title and an honest abstract. Tobias had provided neither. Completion is halted, Roundtree said. The company withdraws from Mr. Crane's option and will retain these documents for the court's inquiry. 6 months after the proofing press left Margaret's hands, one warm page stopped the railway payment from entering Tobias's account. He gathered his gloves without looking at her. You have cost Wychford a station road. The railway surveyor turned the plan around. We have an eastern route across open pasture. It costs less than demolishing an inn. Tobias had never shown that route to the village because it did not pay him. The legal work continued after the public meeting. A court recognized the six-hand settlement, appointed an independent receiver for its past income, and restrained Hale Printing from using the blocks without agreement. Tobias retained the ordinary printing business left by William's will. He lost the illustrated series, the approach sale, and control of the trust accounts. An accounting traced cottage rents and publication fees across 8 years. Tobias's share of Hale Printing was charged with repayment. When his lenders learned that his largest contracts used disputed blocks, they required a manager to sign every new order. Margaret recovered her proofing press through the supplier's counterfoil and her father's probate inventory. Tobias had called it machinery when taking it and her personal property when ordered to return it. The receiver recorded both statements. The blocks came back in 3 wagons. 7 had split from careless storage. Margaret repaired 2 with cross-grain slips and retired the others after pulling preservation proofs. The trust bought replacements openly, paying each engraver by name. Restoring the Swan and Sheaf took 14 months. The first recovered rents paid for a sound pump and glass in the downstairs windows. Owen rebuilt the west fence and strengthened the coach arch before touching the bedrooms. The roof over the former skittle alley waited until the following spring. The receiver released funds by completed stage. A mason repaired the sandstone base before a carpenter straightened the frame above it. New gutters went up before plaster. Bedroom work began only after the cellar joists passed inspection. Margaret wanted the printed rooms first, but Owen made the coach arch safe enough for loaded carts. The order frustrated her and prevented the renovated interior from being damaged by the next delivery of timber. Rebuilding the alley required seasoned elm, a brick-damp course, and better light than the original had allowed. They shortened the playing lane by 8 feet and gave that space to the press floor. High windows faced north. Lockable cabinets stood above the damp line. The plan preserved the social room while removing the conditions that had forced Agatha Crowther to hide every valuable block beneath bowling planks. Margaret reopened the kitchen as a job printing room while masons worked around her. Lodgers used 2 safe chambers. Carrier meals covered coal and soap. Printing paid wages, debt installments, and paper. No single source could fail without warning. Abel Greaves received the final brewery payment on a wet Tuesday. He checked the total twice and handed Margaret the canceled charge. "I still consider this an uncertain business," he said. "You have said so for 14 months. Consistency is useful in accounts." He ordered 50 illustrated inventory cards before leaving. Martha chaired the first trust election. She declined daily work because her hands no longer obeyed a graver. Once a week, she inspected apprentice proofs and found faults from across the room. "That shoulder is carrying no weight," she told one young engraver. "Either lower the box or raise the woman's arm." Sarah ran evening reading sessions in the restored taproom. Anne Clegg kept the wage ticket accounts. Her sons printed railway safety sheets under a contract that required every deduction to appear in type as large as the final balance. Owen's old debt remained on Margaret's ledger until the inn earned enough to pay it. He accepted £1.06. then spent half of it buying a stronger hanging pin for the sign. "That is my expense," Margaret said. "Then add it to my new account." Their arguments became part of the working day. Neither called them courtship. Witchford did so freely and received no confirmation. The rebuilt Skittle Alley kept half its original purpose. 2 evenings a week, pins stood at the far end, and mugs appeared along the benches. On other days, rolling tables carried blocks, type, and drying racks. Anyone could watch a sheet travel from sketch to finished impression. The Trust printed adult readers, fair pay forms, movable safety pictures, and notices for people who could not afford ornamental work. The inn's cottages housed 2 apprentices and a widowed press feeder at controlled rents. Their payments were posted monthly beside the taproom clock. Some villagers praised Margaret only after the railway chose its eastern road. Others never forgave her for making an old account more important than a quick sale. She served both groups at the same bar and charged the same price. On the opening anniversary, a train crossed the new line beyond the pasture. Its whistle carried over the yard without shaking the restored coach arch. Inside the print room, 6 apprentices stood around Margaret's returned press. Each had cut one small block for a new wall sheet. The images showed hands, setting type, guiding paper, turning a roller, checking wages, holding a book, and lifting a finished proof. Margaret locked the blocks into one form. Martha inspected the alignment, tapped the second block with one stiff finger, and nodded. The apprentices inked their cuts together. Margaret pulled the lever. When the bed rolled out, 6 green hands crossed the sheet above 6 printed names. She lifted the fresh impression by its corners and passed it down the line while the train moved on toward Witchford.